The third victim was a paranormal type. You know, the sort of person who decided to make her own ghost hunting team after watching any of those shows out right now. Anna said as we walked into the office. She hadn't been able to sleep last night, so I guess she'd started going through victim number 3's files. So, what's your point? I asked. Sleeping on her couch every night was making me cranky, but thankfully all the weird things had all but stopped happening, and the paranoia and fear was dying down too. I could even probably move back into my own place soon. So, I don't know. Hey, where's John? We walked into our office, boxes and coffee in hand. We sat down at our desks and sipped our coffees for a few minutes before diving back into this god-awful case once more. Before we could get too far into our missing intern, though, one of the forensic scientists came into the room with an envelope. Here's the DNA sample back, guys, he said. We'd sent in the sample that we were working on the first victim. The CSI team grabbed blood samples from the candles that he'd blown out in the first murder. And? Get a match? I asked. Not even close, I'm afraid. It's not even human. I did every test I could think of 1,000,000 times. It's just not human. You see, humans have 46 chromosomes, right? Well, that had 58. I have no clue what it might be. Anna and I looked at each other. Weird, she said. Thanks, Max. He put the envelope with the DNA test results on my desk and left. Anyways, I said, I don't know. I think someone said he called in sick or something. John did look a little under the weather yesterday. Anna nodded in agreement. Well, hopefully he gets back soon, she said. Anna and I went back to the pictures of the third crime scene. It was all the same. Blood, guts, unbelievable gore. I still wasn't used to it, though. It was all more grotesque and inhumane than I thought even possible. I got to a picture of her head. There was a slim, white, stick-looking item sticking out of her skull. Her hair had dried blood all over it, and her eyes sat there open and unseeing. Well, one of them at least. Like that of a porcelain doll watching you as you sleep. From her mouth, blood ran down her cheek onto the ground. Her head sat in a pool of her own blood, but the bone-appearing item stuck into her head was pristine. A pure, unsettling white. I showed it to Anna. I think that's in the box, she said, pointing to the stick. Forensics determined it to be a bone. I shuddered. Anna dug through the box and took the bone out. I took the bag from her and looked at it. Forensics was always careful to not disturb the way that the evidence was found, and even with that care, it was disturbingly white. Let's just watch the video and get it over with already, I said. It can't be that bad, Anna said. I mean, we've seen two of the most brutal murders already, and this victim has most of her body parts still intact, unlike the first two. I guess so. I just don't want to have to look at pictures of dead people anymore. I've had enough for an entire year, I said, exhausted. Before she pushed play on the video player, we just sat there. I guess we were preparing ourselves for it, even if we'd already seen it all. It was then that our boss came in, urging us to finish the case. We sucked up and got him out of the room, and Anna pushed play again. The video started off in what looked like a bedroom. The camera was handheld. The victim sounded excited. She had a chipper, light voice, and the camera was moving around rapidly. We heard a bunch of clicks and snaps and sounds of clothes rustling. We figured that she was getting something together or putting something on. All of a sudden, the camera swung up. We could see her hands grabbing different electronic devices. Okay, I'm all set up. I have my camera on my shoulder mount, I have my EVP recorder, my infrared scanner, and many other pieces of equipment for my line of work," she said while looking into a smaller camera. We would watch that tape, but it was the only tape in the evidence box. "It is 9:14 p.m. here in Seattle, Washington. This is an unofficial SPA investigation. I say unofficial because nobody else in my team is here and I'm off the clock. I'm in my house, all by myself, my little corgi puppy Samson." She was still getting herself ready and giving us other useless information about her house and her equipment that she was using. SPA stood for Seattle Paranormal Association, and as it turned out, she was the co-founder of it. We decided to fast forward a little bit until we saw her go to the door of her bedroom and open it. "Okay, all you ghost hunt fans out there, just a few moments ago, I was hearing strange thumps and what sounded like someone talking. I could hear the voice, but I just couldn't make out what the person or thing was saying. So I hope to capture something on my equipment and share it with all of you." She walked down the hall until she came to her living room. Right upon entering the living room, to her right was a recliner chair, and straight ahead was a couch. She stopped in her tracks. "It just got really cold. Perhaps this is a good place to do an EVP recording. I'll just take a walk around the rest of my house first, so I know where to go after this, unless this is the only cold room." She walked throughout her house. Only the living room seemed to be cold to her. She also mentioned that the living room was where the thumps sounded like they were coming from. "Okay. So, I checked the rest of the house, and it all checked out fine," she said. "Whoa. What is that? My window curtain just moved." She walked over to the window and used some weird device towards it. Turns out it was some sort of EMF detector. It has something to do with shifts in the magnetic fields. A shift is supposed to mean that there's paranormal presence nearby. She moved the curtains, and all three of her windows were open. "Okay, I didn't leave any of these open earlier," she proclaimed. "Weird." She shut them and turned off the light to her patio. She started walking towards the hallway. But just as she reached the hall, there was a very loud crash coming from behind her, near the kitchen. She turned around and just stood there. She then pulled out a flashlight and shined it across the room. "Damn it, that was the plate my mother got me for Christmas. I'm going to pull out my EVP recorder and see if we can get anything on tape." The little device started to beep loudly, like something was there. She pointed her camera in all different directions and started to breathe heavier. "It just got colder, even colder than before. I'm going to do an EVP now." She takes out another device and sits down on the ground. "Is anybody there?" It was quiet for a couple of minutes. "Are there any spirits here who want to make contact?" she said louder. A voice replied. "No?" she echoed. My arm itches. It just started getting all tingly, with a slight burning feeling," she said, directing it towards the camera, most likely for her viewers. "Did someone just touch my arm?"
I am very pleased. You can feel that.
A booming, menacing voice said from somewhere in the room. The victim turned around as fast as she could. The room was dark, adding to the spooky effect for her ghost hunt dark eyes. So we could barely make out what was talking, but Anna and I both knew exactly who was there. The odd thing was, we were not listening to the EVP recording while watching this video. We could hear Stitch talk through the video camera. At least now we know more about this thing. We now know he is very real, not a ghost or a demon or anything else supernatural. Something real. "Were you the entity that that opened my windows and made the thumping sounds? She asked in a worried voice.
That itch that you feel, it's rather interesting that you would feel an itch,
Stitch said. Why? She asked.
That is the part of your body that I was looking at. I wish to eat it.
And all of a sudden, as loud as I've ever heard someone yell in my life, loud enough to knock the victim back on her heels, Stitch said,
And I intend to.
Who are you? The woman asked, her voice shaking.
I am known as Pew in the Netherlands, Garnafex in Laos, Pioveli in Finland, Vardiel in Norway. I have many names, and I have killed many people. At least 10 per country. You will be my third in. I am your worst nightmare, man. I would run.
As he was talking, the woman took something out of her pocket. It was later found to be holy water. She opened the bottle slowly and tossed some of it in the direction of Stitch. Stitch laughed. The woman got up off the ground, turned the light on, and started backing up to the front door. We saw that the holy water had melted some of Stitch's skin into the shape of a cross. It was burned into his skin, like he'd been freshly branded. It was red like you'd expect a burn to be, and crusting. Other than the melting flesh, it didn't seem to affect him. While the woman was backing away, we saw Stitch swinging his chains at her. They wrapped around her arm and tore into her skin. The crunching sound was disgusting as her arm was torn out of her socket and the skin was torn off with it. The camera landed on the ground and we heard chains clanging and the woman screaming, and then we saw her. Her arm was gone, blood was pouring everywhere, and we could see her shoulder blade sticking out of her broken, bloody flesh. The woman screamed and screamed while Stitch laughed and laughed, getting slowly louder like he always did. While she was lying on the ground, Stitch towered over her. She tried to crawl away, but grabbed a piece of the previously broken dish and tried to use it as a weapon. She stabbed it into the first place that she could get into, his arm, but it just went through him. Chunks of blood and guts came out of the other side of his arm, dripping and plopping onto the ground. It was gorier than I thought possible. His blood was dark and crusty, rotten. As it oozed out of his arm, he laughed. He got some of the blood on his fingers with those awful, dirty nails and shoved the blood into the woman's mouth.
You cannot hurt me.
He chuckled. As if to prove his invincibility, he then shoved his hand into his chest and ripped out one of his ribs. The bone that we had found in the evidence box, we assumed. The woman screamed in terror. Why? Why are you haunting me? She said.
You're dumber than I thought. I'm not haunting you. I am going to kill you, chew you to bits, and use your flesh to complete my own.
Stitch responded. Are you a ghost? Or a demon? She said. Her voice was shaking.
No. I am real. I am the one who makes people afraid.
Stitch started to say,
I don't hide under beds or in closets. I watch. I like to see my victims' faces when I study them.
He paused and looked at her. He smiled.
You're scared. You're terrified. I can smell it and can taste it. I can taste it so clearly.
He stroked the spot her arm used to be in and licked the blood off of his fingers. She tried to escape again, but Stitch shoved his fingers into her eyes and held her head like a bowling ball. She kept screaming, but Stitch laughed louder than she screamed. He took his fingers out of her eye sockets and took his torn-out rib and stabbed it into her skull. Her head fell to the ground. Adding insult to injury, Stitch shoved his hand into her chest now and ripped her heart out and ate it. Then he stood up and grabbed her torn-off arm. He stuck the fingers into his mouth and bit them off. The sounds of bone crunching rang out through my ears. I could hear Anna shuddering next to me. But Stitch wasn't done. He took the fingers out of his mouth and stuck them into the woman's mouth. He left, leaving the woman on the floor. Her head was rolled to the side, and what was left of her eyes drooped to the ground. There was blood everywhere, soaking into her carpet, drying into her hair and onto her skin. Her fingers were sticking out of her mouth. Her nails were broken from the struggle. I looked over at Anna. She looked like she had been crying. She acted like she could handle all of this, but I didn't think that she could. I'm going home, she said. She stood up and left the room quickly, and I couldn't blame her. Hell, if I could escape this case, then I would. I guess I will too, I said. I thought she needed some time alone, so I decided to go back to my house. Before I could leave, though, John ran into the office, disheveled. I'm sorry I'm late, he said. Late? I said. It's 3 o'clock, John. May as well just not come in. I know, he said. But I found something, and I thought you should know. Where's Anna? He was talking quickly, like he was panicking. She went home early. Well, spit it out, kid, I said. I didn't really want to hear what he was about to say, but the information could help us stop this guy, so I listened. He's killed more than just 3 people. He's killed like 100 at least. Probably more. He's known all over the world. Like in old folklore. You know how Hansel and Gretel is supposed to scare children into being good? I think that's what Stitch is supposed to be. He's got different names all over the place, but they all translate to executioner. Buell means butcher in Dutch, but same difference. I thought this guy sounded familiar. In college, I took a class on mythology and folklore, and we talked about this guy, he said. He kept moving his hands all over the place and could hardly stand still in the doorway of my office. He'd graduated top of his class at Harvard. Figured I could trust the things that he was saying. I took feverish notes so that I could call Anna later and tell her everything. I don't know if this is something we can stop, Ryan, John said, distraught. Why? I asked. He's been at this for who knows how many years. If they have stories about him all over the world, and he's killed all over the world, what the hell makes you think we can stop him here? We have to try, I said. It's our job as detectives. We have to stop him from killing any more people. I don't give a damn if he's been at this for however many years. It ends here. In Seattle, I said. Whatever you say, Ryan, John replied. He took the beanie he was wearing off his head and twisted it in his hands. How, though? Well, I don't know. You want to stay over at my place tonight? Maybe we could try to bait him somehow? There's got to be something we can do, I said. John sat down next to me and we started researching more. I tried calling Anna while he worked, but she didn't answer. And she didn't come to work the next day either.